Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am excited to talk about the world of books today, one of my favorite topics. My guest today is Alegra Loewenstein. She writes ebook opt-ins and lead generators, for coaches and solopreneurs. She also creates accompanying journals and workbooks for folks who already have published folks, again, like coaches, entrepreneurs, small business owners. And she is quite an author herself. I'm excited to talk about the books she has written and the why behind them. She loves writing books, guided journals, workbooks. She likes to say she has a scientific and engineering brain. So she is really, really good at not only mapping it out, setting the course, so to speak, but she's also very creative as well. And of course, she is a phenomenal writer. So she brings that to her business as well. So welcome to the show today, Alegra.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm super excited to be here. I also love books.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I get to share your journey. Again, a lot of people will say like, oh gosh, I had this huge accomplishment. I not only wrote and published a book, but how many books have you published?
I have 6 books, technically speaking. Some of them are a little similar. So in my mind, there's kind of 5, but technically there's 6.
That's amazing. I mean, you're in a very small percentage of the population to not only write and publish one book, but nonetheless 5 or 6, however you want to look at it. So,
thank you.
So let's go back. I obviously will talk about your books and your business and all the awesome things you do, but we want to learn the story behind the entrepreneur. So take us back, talk about where you're from, where you went to school, and your career path.
Yeah, absolutely. As you already kind of mentioned, I'm a little all over the place with my background, but it really ends up coming together so well as to where I am now. So I grew up in Texas, in the suburbs. Totally hate the suburbs. Will never go back. I'm totally a city girl. And I went to college in Austin. I really had kind of a science brain, and I bounced around the sciences, but I wasn't in love with any of them. I started in engineering, and I was good at it, but I didn't really like it, and ended up honestly getting to my degree just because by the time I'd changed from nutrition to chemistry to botany, I can't even keep track how many times I changed. I went with what I could graduate the fastest with. But as it turns out, it actually was really so perfect for me because it was ecology and conservation biology. And I really, really love nature. And so, maybe that's why I was taking the classes that led to that kind of without knowing of the degree itself. And the classes were a lot of them were outdoors, outdoor labs. So I just loved it. I loved the work, but I also knew I didn't necessarily want to pursue it because I have a lot of interest. So then lo and behold, I completely switched gears, and I went and I did a master's of fine arts in creative writing, which is what brought me to San Diego. I do actually have family here, so I kind of was targeting here when it came time to make that transition. And what I found out, because I did have an emphasis on poetry, was that I like poetry, but I don't love poetry. 3 years of, focusing on it will definitely teach you that. But I love all other aspects of writing. And even sometimes people think poetry, how is that relevant? But poetry is really getting to just the essence of words, right? You're trying to say as much as possible with as few words as possible. It's kind of a simple approach to think about poetry. And yes, there's rhyme and meter and there's all that stuff. Funnily, that kind of goes back to my whole science brain where I can also really geek out on like the patterns and stuff.
Yeah, I could see that.
And then I kind of put them both to use, but not directly with, I spent over a decade working in education, specifically science and environmental education, through a lot of nonprofits, a lot of universities, and I loved that work. It was super fun. Had a family, changed gears. I actually ended up doing health coaching, and that was really where my writing took off, because I was creating the guided journals, the self-help type books, based on what I was seeing worked for people out of health coaching. And then the books really honestly took on a life of their own. So I really focused on writing my own books. And then I started to see what a skill that I had and how I could really serve other people, writing their books for them too. And again, you kind of go back to that balance of the creative and the scientific, is that in the self-help world, it is kind of a scientific formula to figure out how to make sure that everyone, is understanding, and again, the education side, understanding the content in a way where you can really apply it to your life.
Absolutely. So I want to pause real quick here before we dive in much further on I want to talk about the books you wrote and why. But there must have been some inspiration to get into this world of health coaching. What was that?
There have been a few things in my life that really they seemed to be kind of on a whim, but I think it's a whim that's backed up by a lot of passion and kind of a lifelong interest, because I didn't even really know what a health coach did. And the moment that I heard about it, I just thought to myself, oh my God, I would be great at that, even though I didn't really know what it was or what it meant. And so I jumped into that really as as the opportunity to change gears, as I did have a family. And I actually, was not maltreatment or anything, but I got laid off when my first child was about 8 months old. It had nothing to do with having a kid or anything. People always ask me that. No, I loved where I worked. I loved my boss. I was treated very well. They were actually amazing to me, during my maternity leave and stuff. And it was all grant funded, and the grant that funded my position, it ended, and I got laid off. And that was when I said, this is my chance, and I'm gonna pursue this. The health coaching thing, which I didn't really know anything about. But I've always loved, health, nutrition, like having a good quality of life. I was a nutrition major for, again, like I said, a semester in college. So yeah, it was always there. And it just sort of was one of those things I jumped on seemingly on a whim, but sort of based on just really a lifetime of interest in the subject matter.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I'm assuming, because I've seen many of your books, the books came out of this line of work. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how they started. And I really just love that I love health coaching, but I also love that I left it behind, because to me, it really freed me up now to write about any subject that I'm passionate about, beyond just kind of what I had to do to market myself as a health coach. And it's funny, because to me, it's still really relevant, even to that same string of work. So I have a book that I'm working on now, which is ultimately about spending time in nature, which maybe seems less relevant, but so many of our health problems go back to really just being stressed out. I mean, to me, that's the disease of the 21st century.
Yeah.
So many things go back to being stressed out.
Yeah.
And so, maybe not everyone thinks that they love nature, but honestly, we all probably need to spend time in nature, get the sun on our skin and breathe the fresh air and move our bodies. So it's freed me up to not do it in a way where I feel like I have to really talk about, well, this is how it's going to help you lose weight, and it's going to be this specific thing. I can just write it because I know it's important and I love it.
Yeah. I love it. That's great. So it's so interesting. I had heard recently a podcast on NPR on this concept of nature bathing, and I had never heard of that before. I grew up more in I would say sort of the country, if you will, and so growing up in nature was just part of what I did. But it is interesting that a lot of some people just don't get outside. They don't get out into see trees and get out into
Yeah.
nature. It's I can
As much
imagine.
as yeah, as much as I love the city and the life and people being all together and the diversity and the good food, I mean, I really love all that stuff, but it does present us in a situation where we are very, very disconnected from our
Hmm.
natural surroundings, and it's it's a chronic problem. It does actually have health, detrimental health effects. So yeah, there's nature bathing, and the Japanese coined it. It's forest bathing specifically,
Mm,
and they go
okay.
out into the forest. And then there's all this stuff too about things that all the hippies like to do, like walking around barefoot. And then there's actually now science behind it that's showing that it stimulates all these hormones, and it actually does these physiological things to our to our bodies.
Huh.
So yeah, there's just so much to learn, and ultimately be inspired by when you just kind of look at the world around you. So that is, that's a big part of what makes me tick.
That is awesome. I love it. All good reminders. I'm going to get out after our conversation and go walk around in the grass barefoot.
I love it.
Okay. Well, I want to talk about your business, of course. So I want to go back to something I mentioned in the intro. So, folks that are self-employed entrepreneurs, coaches, there's all kinds of different labels we put on people who are working for themselves and helping other people drive their business or personal life or whatever it is. The world of marketing, of course, continues to change daily, but the formula that seems to work for a lot of folks who are, especially, who are coaches, business coaches, personal coaches, that type of thing is, I'm giving out some information. I've got content on my website. I want to give you some of that content in exchange for your information so I can stay in touch with you, right? And general formula, do I have that about right?
Yeah, sounds right.
So your LinkedIn headline is your ebook opt-in ghostwriter. So what exactly does that mean, and what exactly do you do related?
Yes, well, Felina, they say that the book is the new business card.
Yes, exactly.
And and there's so much truth to that, and it also is, I mean, I can definitely geek out on this. There's just so much value to provide that, not just as an opt-in, but in so many realms. So if you're speaking, having a book will open doors for you, and also it's super valuable for your potential client, right? So speakers that I write for, coaches that I write for, they are offering to their clients a whole wide range of different ways to learn from them typically, right? So whether they're speaking or they do one-on-one coaching or group coaching or a course. And the book is such a powerful piece of that and an arm of that that can really work in a lot of different ways. So it's an amazing opt-in, right? So
Mhm.
every business is different, but whether you're going to offer it as a free ebook, that can be a great way to keep in contact with people and get them interested. I will be honest that those people are probably the least likely to read it, and ultimately you do want them to read it because it's going to help them, right? That was part of my motivation in writing the books. The first books that I wrote was that only X number of people are going to hire you. They don't have the budget, or they're not willing to invest it, or whatever it is. But how many more people can you help by offering a book?
Mhm.
And that's also a reason why I'm so obsessed with guided journals, is because people are actually really information overwhelmed, and we
Mm.
typically don't need more information. We need a way to process the information and apply it. And I am an insane consumer of self-help books. I don't know what that says about me, but I love to read them, and personal development and all that stuff. But I also will admit that there's so many times where I sit there, I'm reading the book, I'm nodding my head as I go, thinking, yes, yes, yes. And then I put the book down, and I don't live that way because it's hard to change your life. So a journal is a really awesome tool to come into that space in between and say, look, here's this little bit of information, but here's a way to start reflecting on it in a powerful way that's actually going to bring you awareness, so that the next time, whatever, like you go to the cabinet to try to eat the chocolate, you actually are like, oh, I don't just want chocolate. I'm actually stressed out because of this other thing that happened to me that day.
Yeah.
Are you going to every time not eat the chocolate? No, it's going to take time and practice, but it starts that process. Or I'm working on a book right now on mindful communication, where, again, it's a journal, also self-reflective. Next time you get into that difficult conversation and you're getting triggered and starting to think, oh, this person's doing that, you have reflected to say, look, I have a role in this too. Let me take a step back. And you've done that in a really sacred, peace and quiet of whatever, your office or your bed or wherever you write in the journal. You're basically creating new neural pathways. You're carving them into your brain so that, they're more available to you, because we tend to just get on the freeway and forget that there's other roads to take because they're carved into our brain. We do the same thing. That's habit. It's helpful. Habit's actually really helpful, but we sometimes need to change them, and like you carve them in a peaceful time intentionally, and then you can take them. So, but back to the business thing, ultimately we're all trying to help people, right? I mean, especially in the fields that you talked about, coaches and speakers and all that stuff. If you really want to make an impact, this is, not only an amazing tool to be able to get in touch with potential future clients, but it's also an amazing tool to impact people's lives right this second, which most coaches are going to be wanting to do that, right? That's the why. That's why you're doing it. And so you can really kind of have the best of both worlds. And then there's a whole other branch, marketing wise, that, this has worked really well in my business. But again, I don't know how my clients do all different things. Some don't do this at all. I run ads for my books. And so I reach a really lot of new audience through their purchase of my book. That's like a growth for my business. So I can't communicate with them all, right? They don't all give me their email address, but they're buying my book, right? So then are they going to tell their friends, or some of them? And of course, all my books also have a place in them to like be told, hey, you can get this free resource to support the book on my website also. So each of my books, the way I actually do it, because I'm a book person, is I have an opt-in that goes with each book, right? So I don't give the book away. I give away another thing that supports success with the book. So different books have different things. I have one that comes with an audio. I have one that comes with video, downloads, worksheets. Like I really have no problem making content.
Well, and that's amazing, because so many folks do have a problem making content, right? I mean, it's carving out the time. It seems daunting. It can be technically challenging. And so I love that you've done this, I almost said 1 million times, but maybe not quite 1 million, but a lot of times for yourself. I mean, that's what I love about you, Alegra, is you walk the talk, right? You've done this for yourself and your own business, and now you are helping other people do the same thing, but you've done it. I meet so many folks that they've got a great idea on people, but they've never demonstrated it themselves. And I love that you have.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it was a natural segue to start, being of service by creating content, because when I was trying to sell my coaching, I would have a hard time selling my coaching because I was too busy making more content. I was like, okay, maybe I need to be a content creator, because I can't stop myself.
Yeah. Fair enough. So yeah, and a lot of these folks, again, coaches and speakers and whatnot, they're busy doing their business, right? Stepping off the treadmill to create content, books, especially. I know, I've written one, and I probably will only ever write one book because it was such a process. I mean, it's not just as easy as putting, your thoughts down on paper. It's the structure and the flow. And I hired a developmental editor and several copy editors, and, and then the layout and it's quite a complicated thing. That's why I meet so many people that are saying I'm writing a book. And I meet way less people that have said I've actually published a book, because it's a huge undertaking. Even a small ebook, a 20, 30 page ebook is still quite a bit of work.
Yeah, there's a lot of steps before the writing. I break it down into 3 categories. So I talk about pre-writing, writing, and post-writing. Yeah, so all those things that you mentioned, those are post-writing, and they can blindside you because you don't always realize how many steps, even actually you have the text. There's still a lot of steps to get it ready to publish. And what I tell people is that this is actually one of the things that I really love about working with my writing clients who I'm writing for, is that they actually also are making content. They're just not necessarily making paper content, right? So coaches, really, you are making content. They are going to have their talks, they're going to have their courses, and that, I consider all of that part of the pre-writing phase. And so to hire a ghostwriter, or even if you're going to go a different way and hire like a writing coach, you actually should do that before you ever start to write. So whether you're going to bring someone on as a ghostwriter to outsource it, bring someone on as a coach to hold you accountable and guide you through the whole process, you should really do that after you've done what I call the pre-writing, which is just everything else. It's all of the idea generation, right? Because I will say, is the difference for me with the stuff that I write for myself. Those are my ideas. That's the things that I'm excited about and I'm passionate about. But for my ghostwriting clients, it's not my ideas, right? It's their ideas, it's their content. And so it's also, I don't even really like the word ghostwriting, because I almost consider myself more of a translator, right? Which is where, okay, I'll just talk about the mindful communication book. So it's based on a workshop that my client created and runs on a regular basis. And so she actually has created all the content, and I'm translating that into a book format. And so at that point, if you do have content in other forms, it's you're ready. Like, you actually have a book written. It's just not in the book format.
Exactly. And so, but it's not an easy, if you haven't done it before, you need help. I mean, frankly, it's a whole different animal than writing a blog post, from my experience.
Absolutely. So, it takes a lot of bandwidth.
It does. And people don't have it, or they're not willing to set aside the time. Again, the number of people I talk to that are like, I want to write a book, it's a very different thing than actually doing it. And so I know for myself, paying to get help with my book was the best decision I ever made. I even, part of my book is obviously my story and stories of others, but is, the Steps to Startup program. And I paid a grad student $25 an hour to sit my butt down every Saturday at Hera Hub and sit with me for 4 hours and help me do that research I needed to do to coalesce all the information that I had and the other resources I needed. That's what got me through it, which then allowed me to build it as an e-course. But had I not invested in paying somebody to be my accountability buddy, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah. And I talk about, I tell people all the time, there's so many factors in that decision that sometimes I meet people and it's really, close to their hearts, important to them to be the one to put their fingers on the keyboard. So that's fine. But if it's a business tool, maybe that's not that important, right? Maybe you focus on your zone of genius, which is already speaking, running workshops, running courses, whatever it is, and outsource the translating it into this other format, which again is just one branch. Because I don't know what it is about books. Some people feel, I think, a little bit harder to let go of control of that sometimes, even though you would have no problem being like, oh, here's my idea. I'm going to hire this person to make it into an online course. It's one more translation of your idea into consumable content.
Yeah.
And it takes a lot of bandwidth to go through the process of that. And I love it. I love the writing part. I love looking at what somebody has created, like this workshop or whatever it is based on, and saying, oh, how am I going to, it's kind of that engineering brain, right? Like, how am I going to take this and engineer it into this very linear format that people are going to go through, but they're going to have an arc of experience to kind of come out the other end with a meaningful, what's the right word? Like whatever, like the hero's journey. I don't know. I'm trying to think of my literature words and I can't think of them, but like the hero's journey, right? Because I focus so much on personal development books, and those are my clientele as well. It's like I'm always thinking about the hero's journey of like, how can we come in as the novice and kind of go through this experience and then come out a better person, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to ask, what are some of the things that you're excited about now and working on now? And what are some of the things you're looking forward to for the future?
I really am just so excited to, well, I'll just say this is what I'll say. I am excited to be able to balance my time so that I am both producing my own work and also serving my clients, because I definitely will admit that this is, I suffer the pendulum effect of I'll get really busy, I'll work on some of my book, then I'll bring a client on and I'll completely stop working on my ideas.
Yeah.
And I'll work on their ideas. And to a certain extent, I'm happy with that. It's normal and it's fine. I just have to make sure that the pendulum goes both ways, because the books that I have that are in the works, I don't, as I get busier serving clients, I don't want to stop making my own content as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, looking forward to finding balance.
I love it. I love it. Well, if somebody's interested in learning more about you, Alegra, they want to learn about your services, what you do, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, they can go onto my website. It's alegraloewenstein.com. I'll just spell it ALEGRALOEWENSTEIN. There are a lot of vowels in my name. So that's alegraloewenstein.com, and they can contact me through there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Alegra. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.